The Apprentice of the New World, a forgotten chronicle of early America. Hook, SEO friendly. 5 centuries ago, before the United States was even a dream, a young English apprentice crossed the endless Atlantic, carrying nothing but ambition, fear, and the hope of a life rebuilt. His footsteps carved a path through the early wilderness of North America, revealing lessons about resilience, identity, and the birth pains of a nation to be. This is the story U.S. readers have rarely seen, told through the eyes of someone history never bothered to remember, until now. The Apprentice of the New World, a forgotten chronicle of early America. A historical story shaped for modern U.S. readers, written in smooth narrative flow without using numbers or timestamps. Awakening to an unknown shore. The dawn that rose over the restless Atlantic cast a pale golden shimmer upon the waves, as though the sea itself had chosen to reveal a secret long kept beneath its surface. For the young English apprentice named Rowan Hale, this light felt like a whisper from fate. He stood near the forward beam of a weather-beaten vessel, gripping the rail with hands calloused from years of servitude and silent dreams. Behind him lay a world that had denied him inheritance, dignity, and freedom. Ahead lay a land still unnamed in his heart, spoken only in rumors by sailors with missing teeth and maps stained with ale. The horizon glowed with a shimmering possibility. Rowan tried to imagine what the new world looked like beyond the fog. A place spoken of in taverns with drunken enthusiasm, in guild halls with fearful skepticism, and in the manor kitchens where he had first heard the word that would reshape his life forever. Opportunity. A word lightweight and common in England, but heavy as destiny when tied to a place across an ocean. He closed his eyes and breathed the sharp scent of salt. The apprenticeships of England were supposed to mold men into craftsmen, but for far too many young boys, they shaped little more than silent obedience. Rowan's master had insisted discipline was the only tool that mattered. Rowan believed otherwise. He believed a man could be shaped by hope. The shouts of seamen stirred him from memory as the ship angled toward land. The cries of gulls layered over the wind. Rowan leaned forward and saw it, an expansive shoreline decorated with forests taller than cathedral pillars. This was no England. This was a place uncharted in the pages of his life. In that moment, Rowan felt his chest swell with a mixture of fear and anticipation. He was still an apprentice, but he sensed something changing within him. He was stepping into a world that would demand skills he had not yet learned, courage he had never claimed, and strength he had not known was his. The ship lurched as if nudged by unseen hands, and Rowan steadied himself, whispering a promise to the new horizon. I will not be forgotten here. A land shaped by wildness and whispered myths. The first footsteps Rowan left on the coarse sands felt heavier than they should have, as if the land itself were weighing him, judging whether to accept or reject him. The sense of pine and damp earth replaced the familiar reek of the harbor towns of England. Strange birds cried from the treetops, their songs unfamiliar yet captivating. The settlement rising before him was hardly more than a handful of wooden structures pressed together for warmth against the unknown. Smoke rose from roofs made hurriedly with mismatched shingles. Men in worn boots rushed past carrying barrels, ropes, and tools. Their faces were hardened, their eyes sharpened by the necessity of surviving day to day. Rowan felt suddenly small. He had trained under a blacksmith, learning the art of heating, bending, shaping. But here, everything seemed too raw, too new. A forge had been erected near the settlement's center, its chimney crooked and impatiently assembled. The anvil resting near it looked neglected, as though even iron feared being shaped in a place this uncertain. Yet to Rowan, this forge was both sanctuary and challenge. A woman with a basket of dried fish paused near him, studying him with the gaze of someone accustomed to measuring danger. Her voice was steady, neither welcoming nor hostile. "You're new." Rowan nodded. "I've arrived with the last ship." "Then you'll want to find a place to belong before the nights grow harsher. The forest doesn't forget." She walked away before he could reply, but her words stayed with him. Belonging. It was what he had never found in England and what he desperately hoped to find here. He made his way toward the forge, drawn by a magnetic familiarity. Two men stood arguing near it, one with a bushy red beard and the other lean and pale. Their argument's intensity suggested this was not the first time they had disagreed. Rowan lingered quietly until they noticed him. The red-bearded man crossed his arms. "What do you want, boy?" "I'm an apprentice smith. I came from Essex. I'd like to work here if there's need." The pale man eyed him with suspicion. "Do you know what this land demands? It's not the gentle shaping of horseshoes and door hinges. It's iron for survival." Rowan straightened his back. "Then teach me." A slow smile formed on the red-bearded man's face. He slapped Rowan on the shoulder hard enough to shake the dust from his clothes. "You've got spirit. Spirit's the only thing more valuable than iron à ear." It was the beginning of Rowan's new apprenticeship, one shaped not by the rigid hierarchy of English guilds, but by the brutal honesty of frontier life. When the forest breathes around you. Rowan's early days in the settlement passed like a series of awakening senses. Each morning he learned the meaning of wilderness in ways no book, no master, no English town had ever shown him. The forest surrounding the settlement did not simply exist, it observed. Giant pines stood like silent sentinels, their needles shimmering with dew that reflected morning light like stolen fragments of stars. Some trees bore scars from storms that seemed older than any recorded history. Rowan often found himself staring upward, wondering how many centuries these giants had witnessed and how many stories they'd kept hidden. Working in the forge brought both comfort and trial. The bellows required constant strength. The forge fires burned hotter and wilder than those in England's temperate workshops. And the iron here felt different beneath his hammer, coarser in some ways, demanding respect instead of subservience. The red-bearded smith, whose name Rowan soon learned was Garrick, became both mentor and relentless challenger. Garrick saw potential in him, but refused to coddle it. "You want to survive here?" Garrick would say. "Then listen. The land teaches you how to live, but it also waits for your mistakes." Rowan listened. He learned to temper iron for tools with edges sharp enough to cut through dense undergrowth. He molded hinges for settlers who built cabins against the encroaching cold. He shaped nails that held together the fragile hope of new beginnings. But he also learned something quieter. He heard movement in the trees beyond the edge of the settlement, soft steps, measured breaths, a presence unseen but absolutely aware. At first he assumed it was a wild animal, yet the rhythm felt too deliberate, too human. Garrick noticed Rowan staring into the tree line. "You'll see them before you meet them," Garrick muttered. "See who?" Garrick hesitated, then spoke with a tone rarely heard among the settlers. "Those who belong to this land more than we ever will." Rowan understood later that Garrick referred to the indigenous people who lived far deeper in the forest. People whose traditions, knowledge, and connection to the land far predated the arrival of English settlers. Rowan felt a strange mixture of curiosity and humility. He wondered what they thought of him, of all the settlers, of the noises, fires, and structures built where wildness once reigned uninterrupted. In that moment, Rowan felt his chest swell with a mixture of fear and anticipation. He was still an apprentice, but he sensed something changing within him. He was stepping into a world that would demand skills he had not yet learned, courage he had never claimed, and strength he had not known was his. The first lesson of the New World. The settlement's leaders often gathered near the central post in the evenings to discuss matters that threatened to either unite them or tear them apart. Rowan usually listened from a distance as he cleaned tools or tended the forge's embers. He learned more this way than from any spoken lecture. One night, a heated discussion shook the peaceful quiet. Rowan approached subtly, stopping near the edge of their circle. A map rested on a wooden crate, weighed down by stones to keep it from curling. The leaders leaned over it like men trying to interpret a prophecy. "The forest line moved again," said a man with a scar along his temple. "Or at least it feels like it. The paths aren't the same." A woman with dark braided hair shook her head. "The land doesn't move, Samuel. You simply haven't learned to read it." "But the markers." "They're not your markers," she interrupted. "You can't expect the world to align itself to your habits." Rowan found the words echoing in his own chest. "The world does not bend for you. You bend for the world." Later that night, as he walked back to the forge to prepare the coals for morning, Rowan reflected on how his life had shifted. In England, his future had seemed carved into stone. Here, the future was more like wet clay, shapeable, uncertain, vulnerable to everything around it. This realization carried him through the sleepless nights when the howls of unseen beasts echoed across the settlement. It steadied his hands during the long days of shaping iron. It strengthened his resolve to survive, even when illness spread among the settlers and supplies dwindled. Rowan's growth was not marked by age or achievement, but by his ability to observe and adapt. He was becoming more than an apprentice of iron. He was becoming an apprentice of the new world. When friendship is forged in fire and wilderness. As the weeks unfolded, Rowan began forming connections that reshaped his identity. Garrick, despite his rugged exterior, proved to be more mentor than master. He taught Rowan to read the colors of heated metal, to time each strike of the hammer, and to shape tools that settlers depended on without hesitation. Another relationship emerged unexpectedly. One morning, Rowan approached the forge and found a young girl sitting near the entrance, her knees pulled to her chest. Her hair was tied loosely with a strand of woven fiber. She stared at him as if measuring his intentions. "You're the smith's apprentice," she said quietly. Rowan nodded. "And you are?" "Ilara," she replied without hesitation. "My father trades furs. He says you hammer too loudly and wake half the settlement." Rowan felt his face warm with embarrassment. "Then I must apologize." Ilarin laughed lightly. "Don't. It lets us know you're alive." Her words struck him unexpectedly. In a place where every day held unpredictable dangers, being alive was not something to be taken for granted. Ilara visited the forge often after that. She brought small gifts like berries or carved wooden trinkets. In return, Rowan shaped tiny iron charms for her. Leaves, feathers, stars. Their friendship took shape quietly, like iron cooling into form. Through Ilara, Rowan learned more about the settlement than Garrick or the leaders ever shared openly. She knew who feared the forest, who dreamed of returning to England, who built their homes with hope instead of desperation. But she also understood things few settlers ever grasped. "We are not the first to call this land home," she once said as they walked near the tree line. "And we won't be the last. The question is whether we learn to live with the land or fight it forever." Her youthful wisdom lingered in Rowan's thoughts long after she ran back toward the marketplace. Signs written in smoke. As autumn pressed its cool fingers into the settlement, Rowan began noticing changes in the sky. Smoke patterns shifted with the wind in ways that seemed almost predictive. Garrick often watched these signs with a troubled expression. "The land speaks," Garrick said one evening as they sat outside the forge sharpening blades. But most men never learn to listen. Rowan followed his gaze and saw thin trails of smoke rising far beyond the settlement's borders. These were not the work of settlers. The fires were too distant, too controlled. "Are they watching us?" Rowan asked quietly. "They know we're here," Garrick replied. "They've always known. We are the strangers." The weight of those words, "we are the strangers," pressed into Rowan's understanding of the land and its people. He wondered what the indigenous communities thought of the settlers carving spaces into forests that had stood untouched for generations. He wondered what stories they told about the strange newcomers with their iron tools and fragile hopes. But she also understood things few settlers ever grasped. "We are not the first to call this land home," she once said as they walked near the tree line, "and we won't be the last. The question is whether we learn to live with the land or fight it forever." Her youthful wisdom lingered in Rowan's thoughts long after she ran back toward the marketplace. Signs written in smoke. As autumn pressed its cool fingers into the settlement, Rowan began noticing changes in the sky. Smoke patterns shifted with the wind in ways that seemed almost predictive. Garrick often watched these signs with a troubled expression. "The land speaks," Garrick said one evening as they sat outside the forge sharpening blades. But most men never learn to listen. Rowan followed his gaze and saw thin trails of smoke rising far beyond the settlement's borders. These were not the work of settlers. The fires were too distant, too controlled. "Are they watching us?" Rowan asked quietly. "They know we're here," Garrick replied. "They've always known. We are the strangers." The weight of those words, "we are the strangers," pressed into Rowan's understanding of the land and its people. He wondered what the indigenous communities thought of the settlers carving spaces into forests that had stood untouched for generations. He wondered what stories they told about the strange newcomers with their iron tools and fragile hopes. The beginning of transformation. Rowan's world expanded with each passing day, shaped by challenges that pushed him beyond the limits of his old identity. Whether he molded iron, navigated the woods, or listened to the whispers of people whose ancestors had lived here for centuries, he learned that survival required more than tools. It required awareness, respect, adaptability, a willingness to expand the boundaries of what he believed possible. The settlement itself was transforming, though not always for the better. Conflicts simmered between families. Food supplies fluctuated with unpredictable harvests. Some settlers dreamed of prosperity. Others simply struggled to make it to the next sunrise. Rowan felt himself shifting along with them, no longer an apprentice who merely followed instructions, but a young man forming his own understanding of a land that demanded humility. He did not yet know that fate was preparing to test him in ways far beyond what iron could teach. The deeper forest waited, the unseen watchers waited, and Rowan's own destiny waited, quietly, patiently, just beyond the horizon of his current knowledge. When winter crawls in without warning. The first true winter arrived silently, like a patient predator stalking the unaware. Rowan hadn't expected the cold to descend so fiercely. Frost clung to the edges of every wooden cabin at dawn, as if the land had exhaled ice during the night. The settlement felt smaller beneath the gray sky, almost swallowed by the vast wilderness beyond its perimeter. Rowan stood outside the forge early one morning, breath misting in the air. The iron tools he held felt colder than stone. Even the forge flames seemed reluctant to rise, flickering as though uncertain they could survive against the encroaching chill. Inside, Garrick cursed at the stubborn coals. "Winter here is no English winter," he grumbled. "This land doesn't ease its grip. It tests you, breaks you, or shapes you." Rowan fed more dry timber into the fire. The flames burst upward with a sudden roar, throwing waves of warmth that washed over his aching fingers. His lungs filled with hot, smoky air, a welcome contrast to the biting cold outside. As the day progressed, the settlement buzzed with restless activity. People hurried between cabins, trading supplies, repairing roofs, reinforcing walls. Winter meant danger, illness, hunger, loss. Ilara's father, the fur trader, visited the forge with a bundle of pelts slung over his shoulder. His beard glistened with frost, and his expression was grave. "Cold's coming faster than we expected," he said. "Game is moving deeper into the forest. Food will be scarce." Garrick exchanged a knowing look with him. Rowan saw the fear in their eyes, that silent understanding settlers seldom voiced aloud. Winter wasn't just a season, it was a threat. Rowan spent long hours at the forge crafting tools and repairing whatever the settlers brought: sled runners, hunting knives, metal clasps for heavy furs. Each piece of iron felt heavier, more important, as though it carried the weight of someone's survival. But even in the grip of winter, Rowan found moments of warmth, not in fire, but in connection. Ilara visited often, wrapped in layers of fur and cloth. She carried a small pouch of dried berries one day, offering them to Rowan while he hammered a glowing blade. "You should eat," she said. "You forget to when you work." Rowan smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "I appreciate it." She watched him with quiet curiosity. "You've changed." "In what way?" "You move like the others now," she said, "like someone listening to the land." Rowan paused. It was a simple observation, but it felt profound. For the first time, he realized he no longer felt entirely foreign here. He belonged, at least a little. The visitor beyond the trees. One evening, while Rowan collected firewood near the tree line, he sensed movement behind him. The crack of a branch, the soft rustle of leaves, a presence, calm, not hostile. When he turned, he saw a figure standing beneath the canopy of towering pines. Wrapped in animal skins and adorned with markings of earth pigment, the stranger belonged to the forest more naturally than Rowan ever could. Their eyes met without fear. Rowan slowly lowered the bundle of wood. The stranger observed him, head slightly tilted, as though studying his spirit rather than his form. "I mean no harm," Rowan said carefully. The stranger remained silent for several moments. Then, with a voice soft but steady, they spoke in English, accented but clear. "You listen to the land." Rowan blinked in surprise. "I try to," he replied. The stranger stepped closer, but not too close, enough to reveal the intricate patterns painted on their skin. They were symbols Rowan did not understand, but sensed were sacred. "You strike iron with respect," the stranger said. "Not all of your people do." Rowan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "My people have much to learn." "So do you," the stranger responded, though their tone held no malice, only truth. Before Rowan could speak again, the stranger turned and disappeared back into the forest, as silently as mist dissolving in sunlight. Rowan shivered, not from fear, but awe. He returned to the settlement unsettled, yet enlightened. Something had shifted. The land had acknowledged him, or at least someone who truly understood it had. Rowan paused. It was a simple observation, but it felt profound. For the first time, he realized he no longer felt entirely foreign here. He belonged, at least a little. The visitor beyond the trees. One evening, while Rowan collected firewood near the tree line, he sensed movement behind him. The crack of a branch, the soft rustle of leaves. A presence, calm, not hostile. When he turned, he saw a figure standing beneath the canopy of towering pines. Wrapped in animal skins and adorned with markings of earth pigment, the stranger belonged to the forest more naturally than Rowan ever could. Their eyes met without fear. Rowan slowly lowered the bundle of wood. The stranger observed him, head slightly tilted, as though studying his spirit rather than his form. "I mean no harm," Rowan said carefully. The stranger remained silent for several moments. Then, with a voice soft but steady, they spoke in English, accented but clear. "You listen to the land." Rowan blinked in surprise. "I try to," he replied. The stranger stepped closer, but not too close, enough to reveal the intricate patterns painted on their skin. They were symbols Rowan did not understand, but sensed were sacred. "You strike iron with respect," the stranger said. "Not all of your people do." Rowan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "My people have much to learn." "So do you," the stranger responded, though their tone held no malice, only truth. Before Rowan could speak again, the stranger turned and disappeared back into the forest, as silently as mist dissolving in sunlight. Rowan shivered, not from fear, but awe. He returned to the settlement unsettled yet enlightened. Something had shifted. The land had acknowledged him, or at least someone who truly understood it. Garrick noticed Rowan's distracted expression that evening. "What haunts your thoughts, boy?" "Not a haunting," Rowan replied softly. "A lesson." Garrick raised an eyebrow, but Rowan offered no more. The memory felt like a gift, one he wasn't ready to share. When hunger tightens its grip on the settlement. Snow piled along the edges of cabins. The forest grew eerily quiet. The crackling of ice on the river echoed like distant thunder. Food shortages began to gnaw at the community. Hunters returned with little to show. Mutterings of fear spread quietly at night, especially among families with children. Garrick rationed his food carefully, insisting Rowan take the larger portion. "You're young," Garrick said. "Your body needs more." Rowan disagreed. "We share." The older man grunted, pretending to be annoyed, but Rowan saw gratitude hidden beneath the rough exterior. Some evenings, Rowan heard muffled weeping from neighboring cabins. Others went without firewood, conserving energy. Even the forge burned less frequently now, as coal supplies dwindled. Ilara's visits became rarer. When she did come, her cheeks were hollow, eyes tired. "My father says we'll survive," she said, "but I can tell he's worried." Rowan wished he had something to offer her: food, warmth, certainty. Instead, he extended a hand. "You're not alone." She took it for a moment, then let go. The deepest lessons of the New World were not found in iron or wilderness alone, but in compassion. The fire that saved or destroyed. One bitter night, the wind howled through the settlement like a restless spirit. Rowan sat by the forge, coaxing the embers to life, when he smelled something wrong. Smoke too thick, too wild. A fire was spreading. Rowan rushed outside and saw flames licking the side of a cabin near the settlement's edge. The wind fanned the blaze, scattering sparks across rooftops. People ran with buckets, shouting for help. Garrick stormed from his home, hauling a heavy blanket drenched in water. Rowan joined him, pouring buckets onto the flames. The heat was intense, painful. Smoke stung his eyes. Screams filled the icy night. Ilara's voice cut through the chaos. "Rowan!" He turned just in time to see her struggling to hold back the collapsing door of a burning cabin. Someone was trapped inside. Rowan sprinted toward her, ignoring Garrick's shout of warning. Flames roared overhead. The door buckled inward. Rowan braced it with his shoulder, muscles burning, while Ilara reached inside and pulled out a frightened child. They stumbled backward as the roof caved in seconds later. Garrick dragged Rowan away from the heat, his hands shaking. "You fool," he growled. "Bravery is useless if you die." Rowan coughed through smoke. "The child is alive." Garrick's expression softened, though he tried to hide it. Together, the settlement battled the fire until dawn. The cabin was lost, but the flames hadn't spread further. Rowan collapsed onto cold snow, exhausted. Ilara sat beside him, her breath trembling. "You didn't hesitate," she whispered. "Neither did you." They shared a moment of silence, a bond forged not from convenience, but from survival. The unseen helpers. The following morning, as settlers sifted through charred remains, Rowan noticed something strange. Tracks in the snow. Silent footsteps leading away from the burnt cabin. Not from boots. Bare, soft, human footprints, yet untouched by frost. Ilara knelt beside them. "These aren't ours." Rowan's heart quickened. "The forest watchers?" She nodded. "They helped." As they followed the tracks, they discovered bundles of food wrapped in animal hide left near the settlement boundary. Dried meat, roots, medicinal herbs. A gift. Or perhaps a warning. The settlers gathered around the bundles. Some accepted the offering with gratitude. Others murmured in suspicion. Garrick spoke with firmness. "If someone helps us, we honor it, not question it." Rowan felt a swell of pride in his mentor. Later that day, as Rowan carried the herbs toward the healer's cabin, he heard a voice from the tree line. "You know now." He turned. The stranger from before stood among the trees, watching. "You helped us," Rowan said. The stranger nodded. Fire does not choose who it takes. Winter does not choose who it kills. But people choose whether to let others die. Why help us? Rowan whispered. Because you listen. A soft smile, a rare, almost sacred expression, touched the stranger's face. Learn, respect, protect, and the land may welcome you. Before Rowan could speak again, the stranger melted back into the forest. The burden of choices. As winter slowly loosened its grip, the settlers faced new decisions: expansion, trade, paths into deeper forests. Some settlers argued they should keep to themselves. Others believed cooperation with the land's original inhabitants was the only path forward. Rowan found himself at the center of this quiet divide, not by intention, but by circumstance. Garrick trusted him. Ilara admired him. Even the settlement's leaders sought his perspective. The apprentice who once held no power in England now held influence in a land far more complex. One evening, during a gathering near the central post, Rowan spoke for the first time in front of the council. "We survive not because we are strong," he began, "but because we learn. The forest teaches us. The people who know this land teach us. We cannot pretend we arrived to empty soil." His words hung in the air. Some nodded with understanding. Others shifted uncomfortably. But Rowan stood firm. We must choose respect over fear. The council didn't give an official response, but Rowan knew seeds had been planted. Seeds of coexistence, humility, and growth. Forged in new purpose. As spring arrived, the settlement transformed. Snow melted into rivulets that fed the river. Fresh leaves unfurled with vibrant color. The air smelled of renewal. Rowan felt renewal growing inside, too. He had crossed an ocean seeking opportunity. He had survived winter, fire, hunger, and fear. He had learned from Garrick, from Ilara, and from the forest itself. But the greatest lesson was still emerging. He was no longer merely Rowan the apprentice. He was Rowan the bridge. Between cultures, between old ways and new, between survival and understanding. His hands that once shaped iron now shaped something far more lasting: connection. Ilara walked beside him one afternoon near the riverside, her smile bright in the spring sunlight. "What will you become?" she asked. Rowan looked at his reflection in the rippling water. Not the boy who left England, not the fearful newcomer. "Something this land makes of me," he answered. Ilara laughed softly. "Then it will make something good." The path forward. The stranger from the forest visited Rowan once more, silently as always, appearing at the edge of the settlement at dusk. "You grow," they said simply. "I hope so," Rowan replied. "There will be challenges," the stranger warned. "Not all your people seek harmony. Not all my people trust change. The path ahead will not be straight." Rowan nodded. "Then I'll learn to walk it anyway." The stranger's eyes shone with approval. "You may yet become part of this land." They vanished again, leaving Rowan with a quiet sense of destiny. He didn't know what the future would demand of him, whether this settlement would survive decades or crumble within years, whether new conflicts or alliances would shape the world he was helping build. But he knew this: he would face the future with open eyes. He would carry the lessons of winter, fire, friendship, and humility. He would honor those who came before him. He would help those who stood beside him. And he would never again be the forgotten apprentice. He was a part of history now, even if recorded only in the lives he touched, the iron he shaped, and the land he came to love.